John would be reading that letter, turning and twisting its pages in his trouble, his bewilderment and trouble, breaking his heart about it. The thought made Jolyon acutely miserable. John was such a tender-hearted chap, affectionate to his bones, and conscientious too. It was so unfair, so damned unfair. He remembered Irene saying to him once, "Never was anyone born more loving and lovable than John." Poor little John! His world gone up the spout all of a summer afternoon. Youth took things so hard. And stirred, tormented by that vision of youth taking things hard, Jolyon got out of his chair and went to the window. The boy was nowhere visible, and he passed out. If one could take any help to him now, one must. He traversed the shrubbery, glanced into the walled garden. No John. Nor where the peaches and the apricots were beginning to swell and colour. He passed the cupressus trees, dark and spiral, into the meadow. Where had the boy got to? Had he rushed down to the coppice, his old hunting ground? Jolyon crossed the rows of hay. They would cock it on Monday, and be carrying the day after, if rain held off. Often they had crossed this field together, hand in hand, when John was a little chap. Dash it! The golden age was over by the time one was 10. He came to the pond, where flies and gnats were dancing over a bright reedy surface, and on into the coppice. It was cool there, fragrant of larches. Still no John. He called. No answer. On the log seat he sat down, nervous, anxious, forgetting his own physical sensations. He had been wrong to let the boy get away with that letter. He ought to have kept him under his eye from the start. Greatly troubled, he got up to retrace his steps. At the farm buildings he called again, and looked into the dark cow-house. There, in the cool and the scent of vanilla and ammonia, away from the flies, the three Alderneys were chewing the quiet cud, just milked, waiting for evening to be turned out again into the lower field. One turned a lazy head, a lustrous eye. Jolyon could see the slobber on its grey lower lip. He saw everything with passionate clearness, in the agitation of his nerves, all that in his time he had adored and tried to paint, wonder of light and shade and colour. No wonder the legend put Christ into a manger. What more devotional than the eyes and moon-white horns of a chewing cow in the warm dusk? He called again. No answer. And he hurried away out of the coppice, past the pond, up the hill. Oddly ironical, now he came to think of it, if John had taken the gruel of his discovery down in the coppice, where his mother and Bosinney in those old days had made the plunge of acknowledging their love, where he himself, on the log seat the Sunday morning he came back from Paris, had realized to the full that Irene had become the world to him. That would have been the place for irony to tear the veil from before the eyes of Irene's boy. But he was not here. Where had he got to? One must find the poor chap. A gleam of sun had come, sharpening to his hurrying senses all the beauty of the afternoon, of the tall trees and lengthening shadows, of the blue and the white clouds, the scent of the hay, and the cooing of the pigeons, and the flower shapes standing tall. He came to the rosery, and the beauty of the roses in that sudden sunlight seemed to him unearthly. Rose, you Spaniard! Wonderful 3 words. There she had stood by that bush of dark red roses, had stood to read and decide that John must know it all. He knew all now. Had she chosen wrong? He bent and sniffed a rose. Its petals brushed his nose and trembling lips. Nothing so soft as a rose leaf's velvet, except her neck. Irene. On across the lawn he went, up the slope to the oak tree. Its top alone was glistening, for the sudden sun was away over the house, the lower shade was thick, blessedly cool. He was greatly overheated. He paused a minute with his hand on the rope of the swing. Jolly, Holly, John, the old swing. And suddenly he felt horribly, deadly ill. "I've overdone it," he thought. "By Jove, I've overdone it. After all. He staggered up towards the terrace, dragged himself up the steps, and fell against the wall of the house. He leant there, gasping, his face buried in the honeysuckle that he and she had taken such trouble with that it might sweeten the air which drifted in. Its fragrance mingled with awful pain. "My love," he thought, "the boy!" And with great effort he tottered in through the long window, and sank into old Jolyon's chair. The book was there, a pencil in it. He caught it up, scribbled a word on the open page. His hand dropped. So it was like this, was it? There was a great wrench and darkness. End of Part 3, Chapter 2.